Okay, welcome up everybody. Welcome back. And I'm surprised almost anyone's here because it's a holiday for lots of reasons. Just for the fun of it, since it's the beginning of the secular New Year, or here's what they call it, the civilian year, Ezrachi. In Chumash, is there a New Year or not? We'll start the topic in 2-3 minutes. I get time for people to log on. But what's the logical New Year in Judaism?
First of Nisan. First of Nisan.
Then why do we increment the Shemitah year and after Sukkot in Tishrei?
Ask the rabbi.
Yeah. The agricultural year begins in Tishrei, and B'tzeit Hashana, Chag HaSif, Sukkot is called the end of the year. So the agricultural year in Chumash, which is solar, goes by the rainy season, and that we have in Sefer Dvarim. Now, our historical calendar, the months go by the, it's our Jewish history, goes by the first month when we come out of Egypt. But for the fun of it, if I want to compare New Year's to anniversaries, because anniversaries has a lot to do with New Year's, because it's something I celebrate every year, key moments in our lives, like we celebrate birthdays. It's a type of anniversary of a birth. That's a key moment in everyone's life. Wedding days, we commemorate. Some people, they make a big deal the day they made Aliyah. The Rambam made a big deal about that. A lot of people in Israel who got Zionist upbringings. Either they, maybe another reason not to say Tachnun, but the day you make Aliyah, you do something special. Now, if I wanted to pick an event in Jewish history, which is our birth, so if you want to say the birth of creation, understand, so you can argue Tishrei, Cheshvan. But what event in Jewish history would be the most logical date to have a New Year?
Either Matan Torah or Yetziat Mitzrayim.
Yeah, those are the big two candidates, right? Now, do any of them count as our New Year? Okay, so the first month is the month of Nisan, the month we came out of Egypt. But the day we leave Egypt is not a new year. It's a new month. It's 2 weeks after the new one. Is anything in Chumash called Echad B'Shana? Is there anything we do once a year? Anything come to mind? Anything that we do? Does Chumash ever say something we do once a year? What?
Rosh Hashanah.
It's not called Echad B'Shana.
Yom Kippur.
Exactly. Yom Kippur, the end of Yom Kippur, the end of chapter 16 of Vayikra. You'll see it. This will be a type of introduction to our shir. Yeah, the recording song. The 10th of the month, for some reason, and in fact, in Yecheskel, we're going to see in chapter 40 that the 10th day of the month is called Rosh Hashanah. The 10th day of Tishrei is called Rosh Hashanah for some reason.
For Yovel.
That's
what the Yovel year is called in Rosh Hashanah. Exactly. And in
That's the solar calendar. That is the first.
So Tishrei, like we talked about in our Shir on Chanukah, there is no winter, there is no solstice or equinox on our lunar solar calendar, but there's a month that's the time of the year. So if I'm looking for an equinox, if I'm looking for like the beginning of the year of a solar year, when in idol worship things and in Babylonian culture, the big holidays, the year begins at the equinox when the powers of dark and light are equal. You understand? So there's a big holiday called the vernal equinox, I think it's called, which is the thing. That's when there's Marduk has a big thing in Babylonia. There's a whole big thing they write about that the academics want to compare to our Rosh Hashanah. But I want to claim something a little bit different. Is that the only thing we have once a year is Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur, I think the proper day would be, the proper New Year in Judaism would be the day of Matan Torah, and not the day Yetziat Mitzrayim. So if I take up my kippah sruga for a minute and put on the kippah shchora, our history begins with our commitment at Har Sinai to be God's people. Now, so in theory, it should be on Shavuot. Problem is, I've got to compare. Remember, Chazal compared to a wedding. So I like to compare our anniversary. So some people have anniversary the first day they met, but then some couples meet and then they break up and they get together again.
Okay, this is enough.
So in theory, if I want to pick the date of our national wedding day when we meet God, if it's Matan Torah, I could either have Shavuot, the first Luchot, or Yom Kippur, the second Luchot. So in my opinion, the Avodah of Yom Kippur is our New Year's, Achat B'Shana, once a year, and it's commemorating Har Sinai. By the time I could prove it to you, but that's a whole separate share, because the korbanot of Yom Kippur are the korbanot of the Miluim, of the 8th day of Miluim, yeah, which was when the Shekhinah returned, that went away after Chet HaEgel. So on the day of the Miluim, on the 8th day of the Miluim, we have Shlamim like we had at Har Sinai, and we have Chatat and Olah because of Chet HaEgel. So basically, what I want to claim is that our New Year, I think if there's one day in our calendar which is similar to a New Year, would be the vernal equinox, would be Yom Kippur, and it's marking the day of the Shekhinah returning to the Mishkan, or it's Matan Torah that's livable. It's Matan Torah, the Shekhinah return on the 8th day of the Miluim, on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, but I moved Rosh Chodesh Nisan to Yom Kippur because of the parallel between the korbanot of the Miluim and the korbanot of Yom Kippur. That's if you compare chapter 9 of Vayikra to chapter 16. Anyway, that's a little introduction. I was just killing time until we get started. But what I want to claim is if there's a day that's our Rosh Hashanah, I'd call it Yom Kippur. I mean, our Yom Kippur with Achat B'Shana, and we're doing a cleansing, and we're reaffirming our national history begins not just at Har Sinai, on the day that God enabled the relationship to be eternal by giving us Midot Rachamim. Anyway, so that's my little take for Rosh Hashanah. A little short about Torah. Let me check the chat, and then we'll start our share. Okay. Yeah, someone asked, aren't there 4 New Years? There's New Years for all different reasons, for halachic reasons. I'm saying thematically, I think our anniversary in our relationship with God is the day we got back together, the day where God announced his Midot Rachamim, when we got the second Luchot, which is reaffirming Matan Torah, and what enabled our relationship as God's people to remain eternal is God's attributes of mercy. And the holiday that commemorates that is Yom Kippur. Anyway, that was a little side. Now we'll get started. It sort of relates to the equinox, but what we see something, that the 10th of the month seems to be important. Remember, the 10th of the month is the day we take the Korban Pesach, when we leave Egypt. The 10th of the month is Yom Kippur, or Rosh Hashanah. In the book of Yechezkel, the 10th of the month will be important, and that's where we're going to start our shir today. Let me just share my screen, and I'm sorry, before I share my screen, I'll share the source sheet one more time. There's our source sheet, okay, and who's ever, we have nice turnout today. I was expecting almost nobody. We're almost back to normal. Okay, I can mute everybody real fast. I don't hear any background noise. I think we're okay. We're good? Okay. I should mute everybody? I'll mute everybody just to make sure. I'll just do it one more time. Mute all. And anybody who wants to talk, feel free to put their thing back on. And now I can share my screen and we'll get started. Close. There we go. And share screen. Here we are. Okay. No, we don't want Yechezkel. That's the wrong screen. We want it, but later. Share screen. And I want here we are. Adobe. Okay. Up we go. Okay. So today's share is the 10th of Tevet, or the 8th day after Chanukah. I'll just explain the title and then we'll get to our main topic. Okay. Why am I saying that the 10th of Tevet is the 8th day after Chanukah? Because what we did in our first Chanukah shir, we did the famous Gemara, which I think you've had in 5 different Torah motion shiurim. So I'm not going to go and learn the famous story again because everyone knows it. But remember, there's 8 days before the winter solstice and 8 days after the winter solstice with Adam Rishon. So we celebrate, I tried to prove to you in our last 2 shiurim that the 8 darkest nights of the year are exactly Chanukah, which would be the 8 days getting darker and darker and darker in Adam Rishon. So he made a holiday the next year on the 8 days that he fasted, became a holiday. That was our Saturna. But Kalanda is the 8 days after that. So if I take if Chanukah is the 8 darkest nights of the year, and it ends on the 2nd day of Tevet, then 8 days later is going to be Asar B'Tevet. So if I'm looking for the second holiday, like the last day, 8 days after Chanukah will be Asar B'Tevet, give or take, maybe depending on the what their Rosh Chodesh is going to be. But that's close enough. So that's already a reason that maybe there's something about Asar B'Tevet. There's some potential holiday of a winter solstice holiday. Okay, we'll see why I need the holiday idea as we go on. Now, so we explained that 8 darkest nights of the year, and then 8 days later is Tevet. Now, the 10th of Tevet is an explicit date in the book of Yechezkel. I'm not going to give a whole class on Yechezkel, just enough that we need to appreciate the date. So I'll just quote the chapter 24 in Yechezkel. I mean, the word of God was to Yechezkel in the 9th year, B'chodesh Hasirin, the 10th month, B'asar Chodesh, on the 10th of the month. And God tells Yechezkel, write down that day, that very day, and I'm giving you privy to knowledge that no one in Bavel could possibly know yet, that's the day that Nebuchadnezzar is going to lay a siege on Jerusalem. Now, there was no CNN and no satellite communication. And then on that day, write down the day and give a mashal to the people in Bavel. Now, why is that? Why is it important for Yechezkel? I just want to give the main reason why the date's important. The day is so important that in the Shulchan Aruch and the Avud Raham, but Yosef quotes down, he says that if Asar B'Tevet would come out on Shabbat, we would fast on Shabbos. It's in Shulchan Aruch. But what happens? They work out the calendar, that'll never happen. Leave it to the rabbis. It's part of their thing. On the other hand, it can't come out on a Friday. That we all know. That's a famous Asar B'Tevet, that the only fast day that comes out on a Friday is Asar B'Tevet. That's because that specific day is important, the 10th of Tevet, right? And they quote all the poskim when they bring that law, Shemet Etzem Hayom Hazeh. And that the day, that specific day says twice Etzem Hayom Hazeh, so that day's got to be important. Now, why is this so important to write down today? So just a quick summary. Let me stop the share screen for a minute about Yechezkel. Yechezkel goes out on the first wave of exile. Remember, there's 2 waves of exile at the end of the first temple period. There's what we call Galut Yechonia or Galut Yehoyachin. And that's when the royal family goes out in an organized manner. After Yoakim dies, Yoachin listens to Yirmiyahu and he puts up a white flag and goes out. And the Babylonians make Tzidkiel the new vassal king in Jerusalem. But all the important people, called the Charash Masger, the industrialists, all the royal family, all the army people, all the big shots basically, are exiled to Babylonia. And the simple people are left in Jerusalem. There's still the majority, but there's a serious group of people in Babylonia. And they're hoping that the tide will change, Babylonia will fall, and they'll go back to Israel soon. And they're constantly asking Yechezkel to pray for them to go back to Israel. And all the false prophets are saying we're going back within a couple of years. So, because there's so many false prophets in the time of Yechezkel and Yirmiyahu, and they're all prophesizing, this is like the takeover of Bavel of Jerusalem is something very temporary. The temple could never be destroyed. The Jewish people will never go into exile because we're God's people. It's eternal. And they're encouraging the people, don't give up hope. The temple won't be destroyed. Take on the Babylonians. They're going to fall and everything. And that's what all the false prophets are saying. Yirmiyahu's job in Yerushalayim is to tell the people not to listen to those false prophets. They're saying what they're dreaming, but God never said that. And Yechezkel's job has a different job. Yechezkel has to make sure that when the destruction does happen, the people don't give up hope on Judaism. In other words, if Yechezkel was simply quiet and did nothing, then when the Churban would happen, because 99% of maybe 95% of the prophets, I call them the rabbis of the time, are giving the people false hopes, saying their dreams, but not what God really said, that the temple won't be destroyed and we're going to go, and Babel is going to fall soon and we're going to go back to Israel. And that's what they're hoping for and predicting. When the temple would be destroyed and the rest of the people go into exile, they'd give up all their faith in God. Either they'll stop believing in God, they'll think that God left them, whatever it is, but the Jewish people would be over. Yechezkel has to be able to tell the people, not game over, but we're in rehab. But to give that message, Yechezkel needs credibility. How do you need credibility? If you're what they call a Monday morning quarterback, or what they call 20/20 hindsight, if after it happens, you start opening your mouth, okay, of course now you know. But if you're on record before it happens, when it happens, it'll build credibility. And that explains Yechezkel in a nutshell. Meaning Yechezkel's job before the Churban he can't stop the Khurban, he can't prevent it. He can only tell the people, keep your hopes down for now, because you're not going back. And keep your hopes up afterwards, that one day you're going to return. Now, in order to be able to say something after the Khurban, he has to be on record so he can say, I told you so. So he does the craziest things. He needs PR. There's no other Navi like Yechezkel who does crazy, he lies on his side for hundreds of days. He has visions of the sky falling, the first chapter, a lot of X-rated chapters. That's a good way to get an audience. To read chapter 16, you quote it, you say it without realizing what you're quoting. Yechezkel gets a lot of attention, but God will tell him, you give your message whether they listen or not. It's not your job to convince the people to do anything before the Khurban. Your job is to say things before the destruction, so that when destruction happens, you have credibility. And the last thing that God tells Yechezkel to do is write down the day of Asar B'Tevet, write that date down. So when the refugees of the destruction come to Bavel and tell the story of the destruction, they'll say, guess what? The siege began on the 10th of Tevet. How did Yechezkel know that? So I had it in writing, my prediction came true, and now listen to the rest of my prophecies. Right? So that's Yechezkel, and we'll see that everything I've told you is inside. So that's why the day of Asar B'Tevet is important. But it's going to be even more important why it becomes a fast day for all generations. We'll see soon in our study of Zechariah. So let's go back to our screen. Actually, now I'm going to share Sefer Yechezkel, chapter 24. God says, write down this day. Write down this day, the 10th day of Tevet. This is the day that the king of Bavel will set the siege on Jerusalem. He gives a mashal about the people who are saying in Jerusalem that the walls of Jerusalem will protect us, just like a pot protects the meat inside the pot, called the Trum pot prophecy. And he gives a mashal saying, you're right. The people in Jerusalem are like meat inside of a pot that's boiling. But the people are thinking, just like the pot protects the meat in the pot and the soup in the pot, so will Jerusalem protect the people in Jerusalem, so will the walls of Jerusalem protect them. And Yechezkel says, guess what? The pot's going to boil over. Right? And everyone's going to fall out of it, and the pot won't protect you. The pot's going to go down, the walls will go down with the city. And then he goes on and tells about, what do you call it? What's he tell them? He tells them basically, he says, get a lot of fire underneath it, make the fire really strong so the pot boils over, and then no one will come out of it alive. It's all be burnt up in fire. Then his own wife dies, and he can't sit shiva for because no one's going to be able to sit shiva. It's a really hard parak. But then at the very end, Yechezkel will be a wonder for you, a sign for you. Okay, and then when all this comes true, b'vo'ah, v'datem k'nei Hashem, then you know that I am Hashem who's giving this message. Okay, and then he tells him as follows. And here's what we need for today's share. This is the end of chapter 24. Ba'atem ben Adam. Okay, Yechezkel is always called ben Adam by God. Halob yom kachti mehemet muzam. The day I take away their temple, their source of strength. Ma'oz is the source of strength. Remember Ma'oz Sur? Okay, Masos tifartam. Right? The glory, what they love, the joy of their glory. Machmad enehem. Everyone just loved the temple, put all their faith in the temple. Masan nafsham. There was a whole society just waiting for the Beis Hamikdash was their source of strength because they were sure they'd pray there and God would help them. Of the elders, of the adults and their children, sons and daughters. That was like the national center everyone came to and the source of strength. God's going to take away from them. Yamahu, on that day when God takes away the Beit HaMikdash and the Babylonians destroy the temple, Yavoah Palit Elecha, the refugee from the battle will come to you, to Bavel, to give the news of the battle. B'yamahu, when the news comes of the battle, the destruction did happen, and it began on Asar B'Tevet, Yipatach Pichat HaPalit, the refugee will enable you to open your mouth, and then you can speak. B'lo Teilemo, you won't have to be quiet anymore. You have your credibility, and you'll be a mofet for them. You'll be a wonder, and they'll know that Am Hashem and my words are true. That there's a reason why your temple was destroyed. It's your fault, but one day you'll come back and don't give up hope. Okay, so that's now. It's not just chapter 24 in Yechezkel. I want to give you a little. I'll share my screen here, and back to our source sheet. In Yechezkel, there are 24 chapters of rebuke. See this? The first 24 chapters of the book are the rebuke of Am Yisrael of what's going wrong. It begins in year 5 of their exile. The first 7 chapters. the bulk is in year 6, and the last 3-4 chapters are in year 7, and only the last chapter is year 9. That's when then it's already over. It just so happens that year 5, 6, and 7 are the years when the Babylonians are falling in outside battles, and all the false prophets are saying the worst is over and we're all coming back. So when the people are hoping that the exiles are returning back to Jerusalem, the Babylonians are leaving, it's exactly then when Yechezkel sees God leaving Jerusalem and going to Babylonia. That explains the famous vision in the beginning of Yechezkel. What's important for today's share is that these 24 chapters are the chapters of rebuke of the Jewish people. Afterwards, we have the rebuke of the nations from chapter 25 to 35. Then we have Nechama, we have visions of comfort, famous dry bones. Every parak here is a haftarah. What we read this week was right here. The Eitz Echad Ephraim, the haftarah for Vayigash was right here. Gog Magog is post-redemption, complicated chapter, but also a type of Nechama. And then from chapter 40 to the end, the last 9 chapters is about the future Mikdash. Again, that begins on the 10th of the month, on Rosh Hashanah. Maybe we'll read that real fast. So basically, the only section of Yechezkel that deals with the rebuke of the Jewish people is the first 24 chapters. So the final chapter of Yechezkel, as far as Am Yisrael is concerned, to learn what they did wrong, is going to be chapter 24. It's the end of a unit, and that seals the deal on Jerusalem. That's it. Then it's over. It's only a matter of time. What they call in the Yeshiva B'chusar Zman. It's only a matter of time. Decision's been made. So that's why chapter 24 is important. And that's the final date. That marks the beginning of the end of the First Temple period, which is going to turn into a fast day. But now we have to see what the message of the day is and why in that day. Okay, now, a quick little timeline. So Sefer Yechezkel begins, if we go back here, the book of Yechezkel begins in year 30, we said, right? This is in year 9. If I go back to chapter 1, year 30, we don't know of what, but when you do the calculation, Chazal says it's year 30 of the Yovel, but it's year 30 since they found the Sefer Torah in the time of Yoshiel, in a nutshell. Year 30, which is the 5th year of their exile, or the 5th year of Tzidkiel, and that's when they begin the rebellion against the Babylonians. Now, if you look, this is year 30. Year 30, remember, is year 5 of their exile. Got it? Okay. Now, the end of the book, the last date of the book is in chapter 40, which is the prophecy about the temple and what's going to look like, etc. And that's on the 25th year of their galut. Got it? Which is 20 years after the date the book began. Understand? If the book begins in year 5 of the galut, and this is year 25 of the galut, this is 20 years later. So if the book began in year 30, this is year 50. So Yechezkel's Nevuah of Bat HaMikdash is exactly 50 years since they found the Sefer Torah in the time of Yoshiel, which Chazal say was a Yovel year. Maybe they restarted the Yovel then. But this is the first Yovel, not in the land of Israel. This is the first Yovel without a temple. And therefore, what should happen, right? All the land should go back and reset. But guess what? There's no more. We're not in the land of Israel, and therefore, Rosh Hashanah Basar L'Chodesh. That was my proof that the New Year. I want to do this for New Year's, okay? That our New Year's is that's exactly Yom Kippur, because it's Yom Kippur of a Yovel year, and everyone should be in the Mikdash. That's the big day in the Mikdash when proclaiming Yovel. And now we're in exile. No one's in Jerusalem. And what's Yechezkel do? You can't do nothing. If although this is an ominous day, you have to do something. He gives a tremendously detailed description of measurements of the temple, which is not a practical, at least I don't think so. I don't think it's a practical building, and no one ever built a temple like this. I don't think some people say they can, but I don't think any architect could take this and build a temple from it. But it's a lot of musar. What I like to compare it to, I hope I don't get in trouble for this, for those who used to watch The Simpsons, Bart Simpson, whatever his name was, Bart. So usually the first scene he's writing on the board 100 times. I won't chew gum in class, or remember the first scene, what they used to do before there were computers. So when you have to write something 100 times, it's a way to get a message across, to internalize something. So studying minute details about the temple is simply, basically make a big deal about the temple that day and feel bad that you don't have one. Now, what's described in it, the midot, and what's missing in it, there's no gold in it and things like that. There's tons of messages behind it, but just one quick line to make my point. When the detailed description is over in chapter 43, okay, after he sees the same mareh he saw in the beginning of the book, when God came to destroy the city, okay, and this vision he saw in chapter 1 on the Har Kfar, he sees that vision coming back to Jerusalem. That's Kvod Hashem coming back to the house. And then just like the Ruach brought him in the beginning with Kvod Hashem Im Komo, now it comes back again, and God speaks to him. And then God tells him, Ben Adam, this is a place of my glory, etc. What do you call it? Where I once dwelt with the Jewish people. And when they come back, hopefully they won't defile it again. Okay. And now they'll keep their distance without getting all the messages. Here, and then here's my main point. Vata Ben Adam, Hagated Beit Yisrael Tabayit. Tell the Jewish people these 3.5 chapters of detailed descriptions of building it. Bikamu me'avonoteim. Let them feel bad about their sins. Be ashamed of that you deserve this destruction, and let them measure the tochnit. Basically, you're getting a very tedious assignment, almost a pointless assignment of tiny, very technical measurements. But that's what we're going to do for you to be embarrassed and feel really bad of the fact that it's because of your behavior God had destroyed the temple. And then im nichlamu, if they're ashamed of what they did, then hopefully that will begin the tshuva process that will bring them back. Okay, so we have the shape of the house, its details, etc. Basically, we spend the whole day not learning architecture, but feeling bad and doing something very technical to make a special note of this day and to remember it's our fault the temple was destroyed, but that one day it'll be built again. And then in the details of the Mikdash, then Yecheskel gives visions or ideas and themes, what causes destruction, what needs to happen for it to be rebuilt. Okay, now, that was Yecheskel. That's the connection to Yecheskel, and I want to use all this to explain why the date of Asar B'Tevet would be so important to become a fast day forever and maybe one day a holiday. Let's continue now with our little history class. Okay, so year 1 of the Shemitah year was 18th year of Yoshio, of the Yovel cycle. Okay, and then from year 13 to 31 of Yoshio, that's when Yoshio reigns from age 31. He dies in Megiddo. We're talking about the years of the Yovel kind of thing. So year 50 was Yecheskel's vision of the temple. That's what I made a big deal about just now. That's year 1 is when they find the Sefer Torah, and year 50 is when Yecheskel's vision. In the meantime, Joachim took power and he rebelled against the Babylonians, and that's the first wave of exile. And the 11th year of Joachim, when Joachim goes out into exile, and 11 years later, Tzidkiel rebels and he goes into exile. That's the second wave of exile. Then we have the famous Cyrus decree, 50 years after the temple was destroyed, 7 years after the Babylonians come into power, and we groundbreak on the temple, and that was the Chanukah year on second year of Daryavish. Okay, that's just the background, just the history. What we're going to do now is try to understand how Asar B'Tevet became a fast day. It wasn't a fast day in the first temple period, but it became a fast day in the second temple period. And that's a famous section in Zechariah. And I want to use this to remember at the end of last year, I tried to explain, I probably explained it too many times, why the rabbis put all the focus of Hanukkah onto the menorah. And my claim was, it's not just because of the miracle. The miracle was to make sure to remember Zechariah. Now, if the rabbis are going to focus Hanukkah after the Churban on Zechariah and the menorah of Zechariah, which is our Haftarah for Hanukkah, there must be something in Zechariah's prophecy which is key for appreciating the proper way to celebrate Hanukkah and the meaning of Hanukkah. And what does it mean to celebrate the restoration, Chanukah HaMizbeach or Chanukah HaMikdash, after it was taken away by the Greeks? If I'm going to celebrate and hope that it's going to return one day, to celebrate it properly and putting the focus on Zechariah. So again, the vision of Zechariah with lights is the menorah in chapter 4, V'lo b'chai v'lo b'koach. That was last week's share. But from this week's share, we'll understand the fast days to remember Jerusalem, and we'll see why Zechariah is the Navi, And that was the title. In light of Zechariah, I wanted to send a Sarah Tebet in light of Zechariah, but the pun intended. Okay. So we had a whole series on the Cyrus Declaration. We have to do that again. We did it on our Chanukah share. We talked about the first Intifada from the first year of Koresh when they come back for the next 18 years, to the second year of Daryavesh. There's a building freeze. Just review that again. Remember, the local population sees we're building. They start to complain. They write letters. And there's a building freeze from the time of Koresh, Melech Paras, until the reign of Daryavesh. 18 years of a building freeze. And finally, in chapter 2 of Chagai, we break ground on the 24th of Kislev, and that was our Chanukah share. Okay, I'm just bringing the sources from the Chanukah share. I want to connect it to the Chanukah share. Okay, now, in the book of Ezra, we saw this last week also, the construction is finished 4 years later in year 6. It took 4 years to build. Now, I'm going to explain why this is important. I brought this pasuk in last week's share to explain why, when they break ground, Chanukah time in midwinter of year 2, is not because they're ready to build. It's going to take 4 years to build, 4 more years to build. So they definitely don't have the building materials ready yet. They're just making a meaningful ceremony. And my whole point was they're breaking dafka in the darkest time of the year to give the message of light, and things can only get better. And we hit rock bottom. Now it's time to recover. Now I need this share for today to understand what's happening in chapter 7 of Zechariah. Zechariah chapters 1 through 6 is all in year 2 of Daryavesh. There's 7 prophecies. The menorah is the middle one. Rabbi Ben has a beautiful share on the 7 nevot of Zechariah, how they all match each other. But the main point in year 2, Zechariah together with Chagai trying to get the people all riled up. It can't happen. Remember, they needed chizuk. That was all the shurim we did the last 2 weeks. Now we have to see what happened 2 years later. Okay, so we had the Cyrus decree, the building freeze, groundbreaking, and we completed construction. And now Zechariah chapter 7-8 takes place in year 4 of Daryavesh. Between what? After the big ground, before it's finished. Got it? Now, we're going to read there's 2 chapters, which is really should be 1 chapter. It's 1 continuous nevuah. And the only nevuah of year 4 of Daryavesh in that year, and the only year the nevuah of Zechariah in year 4 of Daryavesh, and the last nevuah of Zechariah to that generation, to the people building. Zechariah 9 to the end is a totally different topic. Now, Zechariah chapter 7 begins as follows, okay? I'll just use the famous line in Hebrew, the people in Babylonia are going to be asking the big question, do we continue fasting on the fast days? This is referring to Tisha B'Av, and that question came up after the 6-day war. Do we continue fasting on Tisha B'Av now that we're sovereign again in Jerusalem? Of course, we continued fasting, and maybe that's why things are so bad. Yes, there are Zionists, or maybe we have to continue fasting because we're nowhere near ready yet for rebuilding a temple. Now, so we're going to read Zechariah. We'll see what happened, and that's going to take us to the 4 fast days to remember Jerusalem, which Asar B'Tevet is the first one in chronological order, but probably the least taught, put it that way, because Shiva B'Tammuz, that's Chet Egel, and also middle of the summer, and starts in 3 weeks. Everyone knows Shiva B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, they form a unit to 3 weeks. Everyone knows Tzum Gedalia because it's the day after Rosh Hashanah, and we're in shul, so of course you know about Tzum Gedalia. But Asar B'Tevet, middle of the winter is really not much of a fast day because you wake up late and the fast is over. Like it's remember the Midrash of Adam Arishon, the days are getting shorter and shorter. Unless you're in the southern hemisphere, it's not really much of a fast day, other than missing breakfast. Now, but let's see what happened on that day. So, year 4 of Daryavesh, Zechariah gets a nevuah on the fourth day of the 9th month. Another Kislev, basically 2 years after they broke ground. Now, there's a delegation coming from Babylonia asking a letter to the Beit HaMikdash. Now, are they sending to Beit El? Was Beit El someone's name, or is Beit El where they're sending it to? Machloket Parshanim, not really important. But Sar Etzer and Rega Melech and Ashav, that's definitely people. And they're coming, this group coming from Babylonia, you can see the Babylonian names, are coming to ask God a question. Remember that phrase? Lachalot et pnei Hashem. They're coming to turn to God, to ask a question in yearning. Remember, by Moshe pnei Hashem. Remember, was a type of prayer, but turning to God. What do they want to know? They have a question. They're in exile. We'll see they've been fasting for the last, who knows how many years since the temple was destroyed. Now that the temple is being rebuilt, do we continue fasting? Remember, asking the priests in the temple and the rabbis and the Nevi'im, like the religious leaders, do we continue fasting in the 5th month, which is Tisha B'Av? Do I refrain from drinking, from wine, and but we do, as we've done already many years. We'll see very soon. It's been 70 years since they started, as the Nafi will say. What do we see from here? That since the temple was destroyed, from the year after the temple was destroyed, a custom began in Babylonia to have a fast day to remember the temple's destruction. And because the temple was destroyed in the 5th month, there was a fast day in the 5th month. It was on the 9th of the month, the 10th of the month, the 7th. You could argue, but there was a fast day in the 5th month. It's called the fast of the 5th month because of the Jewish calendar, and it wasn't set yet. So the day can change because they didn't want to do it on Shabbos for sure. So maybe it changed like what we do with Yom Ha'atzmaut pretty much. So it should be hey, but this year it finally comes out on the 5th. But last couple of years it's been put off all the time, so we don't machalo Shabbos and things. Now, good question, right? Now, there's 2 ways to understand the question. The question can be, of course, it's being rebuilt. You follow? But do we continue fasting after it's rebuilt? No, it's clearly it's being built. Or are they asking, is it really happening? I could assume if it's rebuilt, for sure we don't have to fast. But are they asking, is this really happening? Should we get our hopes up? Is it really happening? Or, of course it's happening because it's halfway done. But now do we continue fasting? Got it? 2 ways to understand it. We'll see what the difference is between them as we go on. But they want to know, do we continue fasting? Now, what should the answer be? So the answer relates to, why are you fasting? Okay? Are you fasting? Remember what happened? We'll see, or remember why it happened. So now, Zechariah needs an answer for the people. Remember, he's one of the Kohanim, he's the Kohen, he's the Navi in the Beit HaMikdash. They're coming to him with the question. He turns to God for the answer. So God tells him as follows: Emor kol amars, tell the people, and the Kohanim who got the question, tell them. And we're going to answer a question with a question. It's a Jewish answer, right? What's God's answer? Ki tzamtem v'safod b'chamishiu b'shvi v'zeh shivim shana tzom tzamtuni ani. Right? God's saying, you've been fasting for the last 70 years. Now we see it's 70 years from the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th year of Dayavesh. It's been 7 years since I started fasting, which we see 70 years. Zechariah also said it was 7 years since the temple was destroyed in chapter 2 and chapter 1. So we see 7 years can be plus minus a year or two. That's clear. Like this week's parsha, 70 nefesh, so 69, 68, depends who you're counting, but you need 70. If you're short somebody, whoever you need to count, you need to get to 70, work out the math. Now, so for the last 7 years, we've been fasting, and God asks, well, you've been fasting, have I been fasting? Of course, God doesn't fast. When you eat and drink, you're the ones eating and drinking. What God is basically saying is, don't ask me diorisis, don't ask me the Rabbanans, ask me diorisis. Meaning, you decided to fast. I didn't tell you to fast. You decided to fast. That was your idea. Right? You're asking me about fasting? That's a Rabbanan. It doesn't say in the Torah, you must fast. It says in the Torah, you should keep my mitzvot. You decided to fast to remember the destruction of the temple. So it's up to you. You decide. Got it? But now, again, in the spirit of a Jewish answer, here's what you should have asked. Remember? If you're going to ask me a question, don't ask me about fasting. Ask me about why you should be fasting or what you should be thinking about on these days. He says as follows: Halot advarim asher kara Hashem biyad hanavim harishonim. What we call Navim Achronim, the later prophets, Zechariah calls the early prophets, because he's a later one. So the Navim Rishonim, we'll see in a minute, that's Yirmiyahu and Yeshayahu, what we call the later prophets. He says, if you want to know what God wants you to do, God doesn't care whether you eat or drink, that's up to you. But remember the things, and Devarim here means the rebuke, not just the words. Should be rebuke here, not words. Remember, That's Hosea. Remember? Dibur sometimes is rebuke. Remember Rashi, the first line of Elad Dvarim, words of rebuke of Moshe Rabbeinu in his speech. So he's saying the rebuke that God called upon you in the time of Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu, who were trying to prevent the temple from being destroyed. Okay? When Yerushalayim was sitting pretty, when things were quiet and peaceful, and all the cities around Jerusalem, everyone was living fine in them. Not just around Jerusalem, also in the south, in the Negev, in the Shfela. The kingdom of Yehudah was doing fine. In the time of Yoshiel and before, in the time of Uziel, in time of Isaiah, and time of Yirmiyahu under Yoshiel, things were doing pretty good. Yerushalayim was fine. And God warned them, if you don't fix your society, I'm going to have to punish you. The people didn't heed the warnings. Remember, Yeshua warned the people, fix your ways, fix your society. Remind them what he told them in a minute. The people didn't listen to the rebuke of the Nevi'im. Therefore, God brought the Assyrians in the time of Isaiah. He brought the Babylonians in the time of Yirmiyahu. Those are the early prophets. And that's why the temple was destroyed, because of the people's behavior. Now, if you're making a fast day, remember not what happened, remember why it happened. Remember why God didn't answer your prayers back then, because you didn't deserve God's help. So if you're going to remember the fast day, don't remember what happened. It's not an historical event to remember. It's remembering why it happened. So hopefully it won't have to happen again when you come back. Now, in case they forgot what the Nevi'im Rishonim said, Zechariah gives them a little chazar shir. Okay, Vayidvar Hashem Zechariah lemor. Okay, Kol Mar Hashem Tzvot. Here's what God told the first prophets: Mishpat emet shvotu. Remember, everything on the agenda of. Remember, if you're, I make fun of my Dati Lumi of the Tzionut Dati. Look at all the things on the agenda of the of religious parties in politics, right? So what's God say? Mishpat emet shvotu. Make sure to have justice, right? Fight criminals and criminal behavior. Okay. Bechesed brachamim asu ish et achiv. Be kind and considerate and merciful on your brethren. V'almana v'yatom v'gerba ani al tashagu. Don't oppress the orphan, the widow, the stranger, the oppressed. Classic, right out of Isaiah and Yirmiyahu. And also, v'rat ish et achiv al tashu bavchem. Don't think bad things about your fellow Jew. Don't call them names. Don't call them animals. Don't think evil things about fellow Jews. Think only kind things about them. Now, that's what God wanted you to do in your society. And Yeshayahu gave that message, and later Yirmiyahu gave that message. And all the people did, they prayed to God to win battles, they didn't fix their ways. By Manu Lakshib, they didn't listen. They put up a cold shoulder, a stubborn shoulder. They didn't listen. Right? They heard, but they didn't listen. They didn't obey. Right? Because what's that have to do with Judaism? All those questions. They made their hearts like a hard stone. It's hard enough to cut, but they don't listen. They hardened their hearts, like Pharaoh did. Right? The Torah means again the rebuke. They didn't listen to the instructions and the rebuke that God sent with His Nevi'im, with the Spirit, the Ad Nevi'im Rishonim, and therefore there was Ketzaf Gadol Meit Hashem. Right? The temple wasn't destroyed because you didn't daven hard enough. The temple was destroyed because your behavior was bad. And then Vahi Kasher Karav Lo Shomeu. I called upon you, the Jewish people, to fix your society, and you didn't listen to me. Listen carefully. Kain ikru v'lo shma, Amar Hashem Tzvot. Therefore, when you called out to me, I didn't listen. Because what does Yirmiyahu and Yeshua have to do with? The people are praying to God. They're coming to the temple and praying and begging God, save us from the Assyrians, later save us from the Babylonians. God didn't answer our prayers. Remember we saw in Yirmiyahu, God told Yirmiyahu, don't pray for them. I'm not listening to their prayers. Even if Moshe came and davened, whoever the Shnech Tzibur might be ain't going to help. Why? Because I called upon you to fix your society. You didn't listen. Therefore, when you call upon me to help you against your enemies, I'm not listening to you. And therefore, Esarim, I'll call it going. Therefore, I scatter them among the nations that they didn't know. Okay. The land was left desolate behind them. No one passing by. And the land, Eretz Chemda, turned into a wasteland. The beautiful land became wasteful. Okay. So he's saying that's what happened. And therefore, be careful what you ask a prophet. Remember? They ask a technical question. Do we fast? Don't we fast? They're wondering, it's Kislev, they're planning for summer camp. Remember? Do we do instructional swimming or regular swimming? If Tisha B'Av. Do we have, they have to make you swim every day for Fleishiks? Or you're planning ahead for next year. you need to know what do we keep Tisha B'Av or not. And Yirmiyah is saying you're looking at the small picture, look at the big picture. Okay. Now, that's not enough for Zachariah. Now he's got to give him, everything. What did God say? Right? I'm zealous now. God's zealous to do what? To bring us back. Okay? No, God wants Jerusalem to be rebuilt. This is the return to Zion. This is exactly Chagai, isn't it? The 2 years after Chagai's Nevuot. God's saying, I want to return to Zion. I want my Shekhinah to return to Yerushalayim. Remember Roni v'simchi bat yom v'shachanti b'tochech 2 years earlier? That's Zachariah. That was the Haftarah for Chanukah. On what condition, we'll see? If Yerushalayim will be called a city of truth. And Harshem Tzvot Har Kodesh. I can return to Jerusalem, that I can do, but you have to make Jerusalem a city of truth. But what type of city are you building? How do your leaders act? Would Jerusalem be known as a city of truth or a city of deceit? Okay? Kol Hashem Tzvot, remember the famous line, Od Yeshvu Zkenim Zkenot B'Rechov Yerushalayim. Elderly people will be sitting in Jerusalem on benches, and little children with their walking sticks, and the cities, the streets of the city, or the playgrounds would be full of little kids. The famous line, it's in the old city by the playground in the Batei Machsa, if you know the old city, but it's Baruch Hashem almost everywhere in Jerusalem. Okay, and Kol Hashem, to the people who returned. Remember, very few young people returned. It's a small group that returned in the meantime. It sounds like amazing for you, because it sounds amazing, but it can happen. Now the famous line, Kol Hashem Tzvot, Hini Moshi et Ami Meretz Mizrach Meretz Mavo Hashem. I'm bringing my people back from the east and from the west. Kibbutz Galuyot. God's saying, I'm enabling the return to Zion. I'm making political events that enable you to return. Okay, and then the famous covenantal line, Vayuli La'am, you can be my people. That's Har Sinai, isn't it? That's Brit. That's the ideal relationship between God and His people. That's what the Mishkan and Mikdash is all about. Remember the end of the chapter 29 about with the Mikdash. V'shachanti b'toch Yerushalayim v'yadu k'nei Hashem. We took you out of Egypt. V'shachni b'tocham. Oh, in what condition? If you do a met and stakah. In other words, if you do a met and stakah, then God's Shekhinah can return. Now he's going to quote Chagai word for word. And last week's share. Kol Hashem Tzvot. Techezakni dechem hashomim et advarim eila mipi anavim asher b'yom yusad beit Hashem Tzvot echal libanot. Right? Remember, get chizuk from the words of my colleague Chagai, who broke the words, the speech he gave, and the rebuke he gave on the day that you established the Beit HaMikdash. Remember, that's exactly 24th of Kislev. There's no doubt Zachariah is referring to the Nevuah of Chagai. He's going to quote it. Ki lifnei hayamim. Remember, beforehand, no one can make a living. Schar damet lo hayah. No one can make a living. Remember, there was nothing to eat, and there was no peace, and things were bad, and everything was falling apart. And now God's saying, because you started working on the temple, like Chagai promised, but I'm not like the old days. Okay? I'm now here to help you. Now the economy will get good again. Right? Things will grow. The rain will come at the right time, and you can dwell in this land. The remainder of the people who have returned can live peacefully in the land. Notice, this can be redemption. Okay, and just like you were a curse among the nations because you're a desolation, now I'm willing now to bring you back. I'll save you, and you'll be a blessing. Don't be afraid. Chizuk again. Remember, it matches the chizuk of Chagai almost word for word. Now comes the big line. Kol Hashem Tzvot. Kasher zamamti lara lachem b'ksif avotechem. Just like I plotted to bring down the temple when your ancestors made me angry, which allowed me to bring in the Babylonians to destroy the temple. Amar Hashem Tzvot. That's right. And I didn't change my mind. I decided to bring the Churban, and I said that was it. I'm not changing my mind. I made that decision. That's what Yirmiyahu was about. And I plotted your destruction. I brought in the Babylonians. Don't be afraid. Now I'm plotting, just like I went out of my way to destroy the temple. I went out of my way to play with historical events, to bring in Koresh and the Babylonians and now Daryavesh to rebuild the temple. but it's not just an empty promise. It's a two-way street. It's, God can do what he can do. God can plot the political events, but redemption's a two-way street. And here's the big line, which is the fast days are all about. Elad Remeshir Tasu. Here's what you need to do. God will take care of his side. Here's what you need to do. Okay? Dabru emet ishet re'eu. Speak truth one to each other. Emet mishpat shalom shiftu b'sharechem. Listen to what the Navi is basically screaming. Right? If you want redemption to happen, the main thing I want is everything that wasn't done before the temple was destroyed that caused the temple to be destroyed. Build a society of truth, of honesty, of justice, of peace. People are getting along and being a society that sanctifies God in their day-to-day behavior. And don't think, oh, what's he doing wrong? What's wrong with him? What's wrong with them? And work what you can do better. Don't start saying everyone else is bad. And don't swear falsely. Don't make up things and don't lie. Don't swear falsely, even for good reasons. That's what God hates. If you're looking at what type of behavior God hates, that's the bad stuff. And now, remember the chapter ago, they asked the question, Rabbi, do we fast or don't we fast? Here's the famous answer. Those are the 4 fast days. This is the source of them. They're on all the slichas all the time. The fast day in the 4th month is what we call our Shiva 17th of Tammuz. The fast in the 5th month we call Tisha B'Av. The fast in the 7th month, that's Sum Gedalia. And the fast of the 10th month, that's Asar B'Tevet. Now we have the source for it. Those fast days, will turn into holidays. On what condition? Be'emet v'shalom ahavu. If you love emet and shalom, and that's the summary of everything he said. Remember emet and shalom? Emet mishpat shalom shiftu b'sharechem. And that's the summary of what he said earlier. Saying, if Am Yisrael understands why the temple was destroyed, if the fast days become a time to remember why it was destroyed, and people internalize that message and build a society that's full of truth and justice and kindness, then there's no reason to fast anymore. Then the fast days can become holidays. And that's the key. So basically what Yitzchak is saying, you're not fasting to remember what happened, you're fasting to remember why it happened, and not just to commemorate an historical event, because we didn't pray hard enough. God was just. In destroying the temple, it was our fault. And if God will enable us to come back, it's in order to give us another chance to do it right. But if we don't do it right, the same thing can happen again. Now, if we do it right, what's Rabbi say? A time will come not only that the Jews will be in Jerusalem, but even non-Jews, right, will come. This is Isaiah's vision already. Other nations, just like Isaiah chapter 2. Not Jews, but even non-Jews will come the Chalot Pnei Hashem. Remember how the whole thing began? A group of Jews from the exile came to Jerusalem, the Chalot Pnei Hashem, by saying, if the people would come back and return to Israel and build that society, then people from other nations will come to Chalot Pnei Hashem, looking for guidance. Ubaumim Rabim, Begoim Atzumim, other nations will come to look for God in Jerusalem, but that can only work if the people living in Jerusalem and the nation in Jerusalem is acting in a way that people respect and look up to. Okay? And then God says at that time, when Am Yisrael is acting properly, and we return to our land and build our temple properly and build a just society, then it'll be so crowded in Jerusalem that 10 people will be waiting in line and holding on the kanaf of Ish Yehudi, saying we want to follow you. And that's, we're not going to do that sure now, but that'd be the key buzzword to understand Megillat Esther. Remember, Ish Yehudi, who should be in Yerushalayim, bringing people to God, is in Shoshana Bira. That's already a shir for Purim. We call Purim Torah. But my whole point is that this parak in Zechariah is key for understanding the deeper message that's hidden in Megillat Esther, but that's a topic for another series. Okay, so that's what I want to share with you on, my time's pretty much up, but that was our theme for Asar B'Tevet. Now, the famous question is, I understand why there won't be fast days. Again, the whole point is the fast days. That's why the halacha, what the Gemara says later on, is that in a time when we're in exile, we fast. Okay, when everything's great, we don't fast. When we return, but it's not complete redemption, the rabbis say, it's up to us. We decide. That's the halacha. That's the sugya in the Gemara that talks about. So that's coming right from Yechezkel. It's saying You decided to fast, it's up to you. But the fast days, to remember why it happened. And that's what we talk about on fast days. So you have to fast to remember why the fast is pointless unless you understand you understand the reason you're fasting is to remember what happened, not remembering not only what happened, but why it happened. Now, what makes them holidays? So it's really interesting is that each of these holidays, each of these days is a potential holiday. The 17th of Tammuz could be what day? The day that the
Simchat Torah.
okay, you get the day that we got the first luchot.
Yeah.
Again, Moshe broke them that day. Had we not seen with Chet Egel, it could have been okay, Simchat Torah, we'll call it. The day that we received the luchot. What happened? Chet Egel. The 9th of Av. Why that day? Because that's the day the Meraglim came back, and that night people cried. Had everyone been Zionistic and listened to the Yoshua and Kalev, etc., we would have gone to Israel the next day. Maybe not Yom Ha'atzmaut, but something similar. But the day has potential good. So much Shvi is actually Rosh Hashanah anyhow. So that's our new year. It's already a holiday, remember? Sum Gedalia is Nidche, but it happened on the first or second day of Rosh Hashanah, depending on how you read the story. But the assassination was on that day. And so we have enough holidays already. The 7th month the whole month is a holiday. And now what are we left with? What potential holiday is Tzom Asiri? And that's how we began this year. So if I'm looking for what holiday, what time of year, what's special about this time of year, the 10th day of the 10th month, first 10 and 10, it's already, look at your hands, you'll see there's something special about 10 and 10. But the 10th day of the 10th month is maybe like the firm version of, if Chanukah is a firm version of Saturnalia, then maybe Asar B'Tev is a firm version of Kalanda. Remember the Avodah Zarah holidays of Adam HaRishon, that he did it for the Shem Shemaim? So I'm looking for something on our calendar, maybe on our lunar calendar, on our solar calendar, on our solar lunar calendar, then maybe this is the light at the end of the tunnel. This is when things are the new year begins, and now we have light, and now the moon is already bigger, and the 10th month, like the winter's over, and we have the 10th of the 10th. It's already we have the 10th of Tevet. So hopefully. Now, if this is the message of Zechariah, you can't miss this message. I think it's really easy to understand why the rabbis made such a big deal about Zechariah with the menorah, and why they needed the miracle of the menorah to be the way we celebrate. If we're going to celebrate the Hashmonaim and Bayit Sheni, rededicating the second temple, especially in light of what went wrong with the Hashmonaim, how they misused their power, and how politics became corrupt and everything, and basically everything that went wrong with that redemption that didn't last as long as it should have and went sour. The next time we have political sovereignty and return to our land, we have to make sure to remember the message behind the menorah, not only about prosperity and military strength and economic strength, but what we do with it. And that's what Zechariah is screaming. And that's I don't have to say anything political, but you can see how little of these Nevi'im people learn, and what are we focusing on as what are our goals now that we have political power? What do we do with them? Hopefully, Zechariah can be a guide, and that's the idea of that's why Zechariah's menorah is so key to the whole theme of Hanukkah, and that's why I went in with, because people say that 8 days after they want to take the 8 days, from Xmas to it's like his bris kind of idea. That's what that's what he teach us. That's why you can't celebrate New Year's, because it's a Goyish holiday, because if Christmas is his birth, then that's his bris. Of course, he wasn't born then anyhow, so that's the thing. But it's also this, they pick on the 8 days difference between them. But I wanted to bring a different type of light onto the fast days. So since Asar B'Tevet is coming up this week, I thought it would be, and I want to tie this to Chanukah, and a chance to teach Zechariah. So just a quick note, and then I'll take a look at the chat. Our next series it's not a shir. One second, let me turn this off. My next series, I just love the story of the Exodus. I've never had a chance to teach it. It's one of my favorite when I teach Chumash, like Yetziat Mitzrayim. So there's always a quick shir here or there. I finally want to have a chance to do it properly. So it's going to sort of follow. It's not, I told Rabbi Jay, it's not instead of the Parshat Shavua shir. It's not shir on Parshat Shavua. it's a seer to understand the Exodus. It's really complicated, the story. I have a theory, which is quite, you'll see, to explain the Exodus. I want to see if you buy it. Like I had my theory about the ger. I'm looking, I want people to argue with me because I want to make sure that there's not a hole in it. So I'm going to present my theory of the Exodus to you. It'll take 4 or 5 classes. It'll just happen to coincide with Parshat Shavuos. You guys will be in the Parsha anyhow. We'll start that next week. I think it'll be a lot of fun. We'll see how it goes. And we'll get, now let me look at the chat. I didn't look at the chat the whole shir. Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. IP. After 7 years, remember why? What? But it happened to other individuals, early version of nation. Now we didn't sin this. Wait a second. Didn't understand that one. Doesn't going to exile mean as a nation we can't repent? No. And I'll try to explain if I understood the question. Going to exile is rehab. Okay? But it's not game over, it's rehab. But in rehab, you can only focus on what Chazal call for amot of halacha. It's because you misuse your sovereignty, right? You lose your sovereignty.
But Rabbi, you can't rehab your knee for my knee injury. Even if I was your son, you can only rehab the people who actually sinned. The people who didn't sin aren't doing rehab. They're doing something else, but they're not doing rehab.
No, but
your illness can't be rehabbed by me.
No, what I'm getting at is that if the nation is in exile, so that you no longer have you've lost your sovereignty, but you appreciate what it means to be under someone else's rule.
But my contention is they're not a nation. They're a group of individuals. They don't have sovereignty. It's a different animal already.
Okay, but we're still a nation. That's what we're a nation because we keep the same Torah. We have the same goal. We're a nation without political sovereignty, but the Jewish people remain a nation.
You're co-religionist without. You're not a nation.
Okay, yeah. So it depends what you want to call a nation, but that's a technical definition of what the word nation means. That's all. But the people still have to do. Okay, that's the music part. Okay. Repentance and good and deeds are forever. Bad deeds are temporary. Okay, I see what you mean. Okay. Okay, talking about nigunim, I'm not sure. Remember, there's little redemption in the material world and great. Okay. Remember, there's a little redemption in the material world and great redemption in the spiritual world. Okay. That's fine. Okay. Zechariah emphasized speak truth, ishet re'eo, rather than mishloach manot. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's roots leading to the ishet re'eo. There's just tons of when you read Zechariah, when you know Zechariah called, and you read Megillat Esther, you can't miss the fact that the author of Megillat Esther is assuming that his audience knows Zechariah. And then all these phrases like Ishet Re'eu and Ish Yehudi are going to take on different meaning when you read Megillat Esther. Okay? Okay. Last over 1,500 years, Rambam has to make same point as Zechariah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, in the end of God's Repex, his whole the theme of Mishpat and Staka is the end of the last chapter of Mor Nevuchim. Good point. Okay, is there such thing as communal responsibility? Okay, so what Ed's saying about communal responsibility, there's chapter 18 in Yechezkel is exactly that topic, but everyone uses as a source of where Yechezkel is emphasizing everyone's punished for their own deeds and not for the deeds of a previous generation. But that's a whole, understanding that chapter in Yechezkel, that's a whole long share. But the idea of, I'm not talking about one generation being punished for the others, but we have our national existence and God deals with us as a nation, for good or for bad.
Rabbi, isn't
Yeah,
it also true that there is communal responsibility, not just personal responsibility? So therefore, there's an intersection, and that therefore the sins of our individuals do impact the sins of us as a community and vice versa. Yeah, for sure. If I don't recycle and put all, my actions are going to put a hole in the ozone, other people will suffer from it if they're right. It's in natural life. That's what happens. That's what happens all the time. That what I do affects other people. That happens in nature and happens. Now it can help us sometimes that we can have a couple bad people, but if the main group is good, they can sort of come along with us
if the whole nation is doing good. But the same thing happened on the flip side.
Thank you. Excellent. Sure.
That's the big theological question comes up with Avram and Stone when Avram says, "Ha'ish echad yachdav al kodat tiksof." That happens to be reality. So Avram's questioning that, but that's the whole point, that if you know that, then if you know that other people's bad behavior can affect everyone, then maybe you do something to make sure they don't behave that way. If this means throwing rocks at them or setting an example, that's already a different question. But
Or favorable rebuke.
Yeah. And how to do it, that's already a different question of hashkafa. Okay. Anyway, everyone have a good week and a good winter, whatever it is. And hopefully next week we'll start the new series. We'll try to have it'll be a lot more fun, I think. It'll be like a
Thank you,
detective
Rabbi.
game.
Forward.
Shavua
Wonderful.
tov.
Thank you.
Shavua tov.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Shavua
So, bye-bye.
tov. Happy, healthy New Year. Thank you,
Amen.
Rabbi.
Amen. Let me stop the recording. There we go.